All right, we're now picking up at Genesis 39. We're returning to Joseph. So we had at the beginning, we're introduced to Joseph and his brothers, and we're getting a sense of the wickedness and the depravity of the brothers. And we have this interlude with Judah in chapter 38. So we have Joseph being sold off into slavery as if that wasn't bad enough. And then in Genesis 38, we turn aside from the Joseph story and we entertained Judah for a chapter. And there we saw a few things. Tell me about Judah's problems, shall we say. What's wrong with Judah here? What are some things that he does that are really troublesome?
Turns to the neighboring people who are not of his faith and starts. It pulls a wife for his oldest boy, and it just kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah. It's really interesting. The chapter began with that phrase, Judah saw and he took, which is the classic line that we've seen a few times in Genesis 3, when Eve saw the fruit and took it, where the sons of God saw the daughters of men and took anyone they wanted. It's kind of a little hint that this isn't good. This is a bad thing. And he takes a Canaanite woman. He intermarries with the land. And remember, we know that's not right because of what happened with Abraham and Isaac. Do you remember when Abraham gave instructions to his servant to get a wife for Isaac and what he said?
Not to
Very
marry,
specific about it.
not to marry any of the people of the land, the
Yeah.
Canaanites.
Yeah, go to my home, go to Haran. Do not take a wife from the people of this land. So we have that. And so Isaac's situation. And then when Isaac's son Esau marries two Hittite women, we see how that is really troublesome. That was a real pain for both Isaac and Rebekah over this.
Mm.
And so now Judah, who is so important in this line, all the kings are going to come from him. He takes a Canaanite woman, and even that phrase at the beginning, he turned aside, really sort of physically depicts what's going on here. He's turning aside, going away from the family. He's going away from God. He marries a Canaanite woman, has three boys, Onan, and Shelah, and is killed. Dies, but it was clear the Lord, make no mistake, the Lord put him to death. We don't know how he died, but the Lord did this. And why did he do it?
He's wicked, evil.
Yeah, he was wicked. Doesn't say what he did, but just that he was wicked in the sight of the Lord. Onan gets killed, as we talked about that before, because he doesn't fulfill his duty as a brother for pure selfish reasons, and he is put to death. Judah now, in response to this, in a sense, punishes Tamar, the wife, thinking that she's the reason that his boys are dying, not because they're so wicked, but she's something wrong with her. He sends her back to her father, says he'll give her his youngest son as a husband, but he never comes through with that. And as we've seen throughout the book of Genesis, he has to be deceived to do the right thing. She needs a family. She needs sons. It was cruel what he did to her. It was really a wicked, selfish thing. And she tricks him by pretending to be a cult prostitute. And he sleeps with her. Again, there's so much wrong with this scene. Not just that he is sexually immoral going after a prostitute, but she's a cult prostitute. So you have that element of idolatry in this scene too. This man is so dark right now. Yeah. But through her trickery, she saves the day and gives him proper children who will carry on the line because his first three sons are useless. But she gives him proper children, and we see she becomes pregnant. And again, Judah, of all the people we've met so far, I think he infuriates me the most. Precisely because what's his response when he finds out that his daughter-in-law is pregnant from prostitution?
Burner.
Right? What a wicked woman she is. And if you remember when he couldn't find the cult prostitute that he sent the goat to her, and he says, "Oh well," he says, "Don't seek her out because lest we be laughed at." He's so consumed with his reputation. He really is. He's like the Pharisees in the Gospels. He's absolutely the Pharisee, wicked and corrupt, but still maintaining his dignity and his reputation and wanting everyone to think well of him so that he is righteously indignant when his daughter-in-law commits immorality. But of course, the story ends wonderfully as he is humiliated and publicly exposed and has to acknowledge, if you remember, when you see him waking up when he says something. Do you remember what he says?
She's more righteous than I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's more righteous than I am. And he realizes he did her wrong. And that's the turning point. That's like the born again moment as he is publicly humiliated. And now we will begin to see his redemption. He will come again in the story a little later on, and we'll see this is a different man than we saw before. So that's where we left off. Last time in 38, she gives birth to the twins, and Perez is the one who reaches forward, and he'll be the one to carry on the line. And we'll see Judah and Perez in the genealogy of Christ, and so forth. But now we return to Joseph. So we left him off. Where did we leave off Joseph back at the end of 37? Where was he at that point?
He had been sold into slavery.
Yeah, who bought him, by the way?
Potiphar.
Before
No.
who bought him from the brothers?
Oh.
Was it?
Ishmaelites.
Yeah, a band of Ishmaelites were coming through, and they were traveling to Egypt, and they bought him as a slave to sell in Egypt. And they're the ones who take him for, was it 20 pieces of silver?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then they'll sell him, I'm sure, for much more when they get to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, is the one who buys him. That's where we left him off. So now we'll pick it up. Genesis 39. Bob Thomas, would you read this start for us, verses 1 to 6?
Sure. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him with from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in the house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he felt all that he had in Joseph's charge. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge and and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate.
Thank you. You know, I had an Old Testament professor that gave us some really good counsel when you're reading the Old Testament stories, and to realize that the hero of every story is the Lord. It is not Joseph.
Mhm.
It is not Moses. It's not David. It's not any of these people. It is the Lord who is the hero. And that's why that play, that fun play that a lot of people love, the Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. If you remember that Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, very famous one. Donny Osmond played Joseph in it when they were traveling.
Yep.
And I remember, again, a friend of mine said he saw it. He says, "Oh, it's a great show because it's exactly the story of Joseph. It's in the Bible." And I said, "True, but to an extent, except that it doesn't have the main character in it, which is the Lord. There is no mention of the Lord in that musical whatsoever." And it's a total distortion, even though it gets all the scenes correct. It's a complete distortion of the story because it leaves out the main character, which is the Lord. And you notice, just look at this paragraph. How many times is the Lord's name mentioned in this first 6 verses? Go through here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the Lord is mentioned in that opening paragraph. And so that's what we want to focus on here, is not so much Joseph at the moment. He's not the hero, but the Lord. So here's what happens is Joseph is brought down to Egypt, and who buys him?
Potiphar.
Potiphar,
Potiphar. And who is he?
Captain.
an officer of the Pharaoh.
So he's an officer of Pharaoh. So that's the captain of the guard. So he's got connections,
Mm,
and buys him. Okay, good.
Mm.
And basically, how do things go for Potiphar once he hires Joseph?
Extremely well.
All goes well for Potiphar, and he knows it's because of Joseph here. And he puts Joseph in charge of what?
His whole
Everything.
house, everything.
Yeah, puts him in charge of everything. That's amazing. Puts this slave in charge of everything that he has. Okay. All right. Those are the facts of the case. But again, the focus is on the Lord. What is said about the Lord in this scene here?
There he was with Joseph.
All right. So he says the Lord was with Joseph. And what did that mean? If the Lord's with him?
Everything he
that?
touched turned to gold.
Yeah.
He was successful in everything.
Yeah, successful in everything. So he's not successful in everything because he's talented and smart. I'm sure he's smart. I'm sure he's talented, and healthy and strong and all that stuff. No, it's the Lord was with him. It's very similar to his father, Jacob, when he's with Laban. No matter what Laban did, everything Jacob touched worked. It just worked. And it's not because he outsmarted him. It's not because he knew all the proper techniques of raising flocks and he knew how to take advantage of him. It was just the Lord was with him as he promised he would be. We see it again here.
And Potiphar, who probably had plenty of other gods, realized that the Lord was with Joseph.
And that's exactly what it said, verse 3. His master saw that the Lord was with him. So Potiphar could see that this was the Lord. As we saw with other cases where these foreign kings say to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, I know the Lord is with you, therefore let's have a treaty because, you've got something going on here. And he also saw that the Lord
Blessed.
caused all that he did to succeed, caused his success, right? And then we further see what else, as you mentioned there, Elizabeth, Liz, verse 5.
The Lord was blessing them all.
So the Lord blessed Potiphar's house because of Jacob. Because of
Joseph.
Joseph.
And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had.
Mm.
That word blessed is why is it used there? What's the significance of blessed and blessing?
The gifts from God.
It is. Let's go back to the covenant that God made with Abraham. What was the covenant? What was his promises to Abraham?
People around him would be blessed by him.
Yeah. I will bless everyone that blesses you, I will bless, and all nations will be blessed through you. Again, we see that promise coming through here. This is based, again, there's nothing about Joseph so far that we've seen that we would say, boy, he earned the blessing of the Lord. All we know is he's the youngest, and he's the 11th brother. He's a favorite of his dad. his brothers hate him, and God has given him dreams that he will rise above his brothers. But there's nothing about his behavior. It doesn't say that he was righteous and deserving. It doesn't say that he was talented or worthy in some way. It's just God's fulfilling his promise to Abraham that all nations will be blessed through you. His blessings coming through these people. And so it's coming through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, and now we can see through Joseph too. Blessing of the Lord is on all that he has. So that's the setup for the first part of the scene. But so the Lord's with him, and Potiphar's blessed because of that. That's great. But of course, there needs to be some drama here. And so we see the next section here. We get to a little bit of trouble, shall we say. Let's pick up that next paragraph. Liz, would you get that for us? Verses 6 to 10.
Oh, 6 to 10. Okay, let me. Yeah. Is it possible? I probably emailed you too late. I had my eyes dilated at the doctor's office, so things
Yeah,
are a
yeah.
little bit blurry. Could I not read today?
Of course.
I
Liz,
really
would you get that
appreciate
for
it.
us? Liz Prentice?
Sure. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her.
Okay. So the setup is, what do we know about Joseph?
Good looking dude.
Yeah, Joseph is a looker. Good looking guy. Looking man. And then what, because of that,
Asked his wife wants him.
Mm,
yeah, Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him.
mm,
And pretty it was pretty intense. I mean, how long did she try doing this?
Many days.
Yeah, day after day she's coming after him. I mean, this is
relentless.
relentless. And now we reveal something about Joseph. What do we learn about Joseph in this? This is a good test of him. And what do we see?
He has
He has-
integrity.
Integrity, yes.
Yeah. Joseph is, I would say at this point, he's a righteous man. He, in a number of ways, notice what he says. Not just what he does or doesn't do, but how he explains why he doesn't do it.
Well,
So
it said it would also be a sin against God.
Yeah.
so he refuses the temptation and really the pressure of it. Not I don't even know that I don't know that he was like necessarily attracted to Potiphar's wife, but the pressure and she's a powerful woman would be intense. So he refuses the temptation, stands firm in the trial, but then he says why. And what was that again, Bob?
That it would be a sin against God.
How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?
Mm,
He refuses to sin, not just against Pharaoh. I mean, in fact, not just against Potiphar, against God by basically betraying Potiphar, who was entrusted with so much. But so we can see right there, he's a righteous man and really a man of faith
mm,
at that point too. He understands who God is, and it would be a great offense for him to having been, if you think about that, he's been blessed. And in a sense, he comes into Pharaoh's house as a slave. But Pharaoh, in a sense, I mean, not Pharaoh, I keep saying that, but Potiphar, in a sense, sets him free so that he gives him charge of everything. So he's like a son in this house. He's kind of granted freedom. And now he does not use that freedom to sin. He does not take advantage of that freedom that he's been given and all the blessings to indulge any selfish appetites or ambitions. but he's a real man of faith, understanding this is from God. All that he has is not because of Potiphar, it's because of God. God is the one who's blessed him. The Lord has blessed him. And
Right.
if I do this, it's a sin against my true benefactor, not Potiphar, it's God. So that's where we are here. So he refuses to do so, but she persists. Let's keep going. Verse 11 to 18. Rob Roy, you want to get that for us?
Okay. Well, one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the man of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." Then she laid up his garment by her and until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house."
It's an interesting phrase.
What a
Um,
wicked.
Yeah, this is a pretty wicked woman here. So,
Yes.
so she catches him one time. She has an opportunity. She catches his garment and he flees as he flees. And then she makes up a story. And what does she say? Her Potiphar's wife's story.
He came in to
Called a slander. Yeah.
to work me over, so to speak, and when I screamed, he split.
So
She
it's-
set him up. Yeah.
go ahead.
I said she set him up. She lied about.
Yeah, so as soon as he thought he fled, he has the garment now. She can really accuse him. She is. I mean, what is it? Hell hath no fury as a woman scorned, kind of thing.
Right.
She's furious of being rejected like this, and so she determines now to get revenge and to punish him for this. So she accuses him. She says, but verse 14, see, this
think-
Hebrew to laugh at us. What an interesting phrase.
Isn't it funny if she refers to him as a Hebrew?
She refers to him as a Hebrew. That's what they were called. Abraham was a Hebrew.
Right.
They-
No,
they
I'm just saying that she's sort of slandering him before one minute she's drooling over him, the next minute she's using this word like a carnal
Oh yeah, yeah.
insult.
So the Hebrew,
The whole idea of laughing at us almost seems like he didn't just come in here to have sex with me. He came in here to dehumanize me, in a sense. There's even an uptick in
yeah. Do we have a note on that? Because that's the same word. If you remember when Isaac was caught by the king of caressing Rebecca, and he had said she was her sister, but the king looks down, he sees that, and it says the king sees them laughing. And it's sort of they use the word laughter as a euphemism of some kind for
Intimate.
for
Okay.
a sexual encounter. So if there's a note, if anyone have a note on that, why it said he came to laugh at me. I don't have anything with me right now, but while you're looking that up, so Hebrew, he's called a Hebrew. Do you know where that term comes from?
Yeah, you told us once before, and I'm trying to recall it. It's the
descendants of Eber.
Eber.
Yeah. You see him in the line of Abraham. So they're not Israelites yet. The Israelites don't come until the time of Moses, when they're called Israelites, the descendants of Israel, of Jacob. But at this point, they're under Abraham's tent, and Abraham is considered a Hebrew, descendant of Eber in the line there. So Joseph's a Hebrew, and what did you find anything on that laughing?
Mhm.
I can't find anything.
All right. So it could be a couple things. It came to, he says clearly to lie with me. She's claiming it's rape.
The King James Version says that he came in to lie with me.
Yeah, and I cried out with a loud voice, but it also says laugh, doesn't it? In verse 17.
The Hebrew unto us to mock us, he came into me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice.
Yeah,
Okay.
the
So
NASB says he came in to make sport of me.
to
Yeah.
make sport. Okay. All right. So to lie with me, to make sport, to mock, to laugh at, emphasizing the humiliation of this. She's innocent. She's totally innocent. She didn't do anything. He's the one who came in and did this. And of course, Potiphar's wife she cried out. Potiphar's wife. I cried out.
I got a funny feeling she sent all the men out of the house when she knew he was coming back.
He went into the house to do his work. None of the men in the house was there in the house. Yeah.
I think she previously said, everybody out.
See, and then she calls him back in. She calls him back in for this when it doesn't work. So when it's really an opportunity, she really goes with force. He runs away, and now she can cry out because again, it's a humiliating thing, the truth here for her that she not only was trying to, it's a double humiliation, is she is being unfaithful, trying to be unfaithful to her husband, and the even greater humiliation of it's not working. She can't, she's not in her mind beautiful enough, she's not attractive enough to get someone to sleep, get the pool boy to sleep with her kind of thing. So it's, you know,
I like
hum-
that she says that he left his garment beside me.
yeah.
She tried to trap him by holding on to the garment.
Yes. He left his, he probably just took him, she's described like he disrobed in front of me and was ready to attack me. I screamed and he left it there and ran away. Um, and then she tells it to,
Potiphar.
she tells the story first to the men, and then to Potiphar. It's brilliant now because no one saw it except for her and Joseph, and the men will corroborate her story. Oh yeah, she screamed, and yeah, she's got a garment. So Potiphar, if he checks it out, knows that is convinced that Joseph did this. All right, let's pick it up. 19 to 23. Let's see. Claudette, you want to finish up for us?
Yep. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me. This is the way your servant treated me. His anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed.
Okay. All right. So the Potiphar, how does Potiphar react to the news?
Very angry.
Anger kindled. And what does he do?
Puts
In
Joseph
prison.
in prison.
Prison.
Throws Joseph in prison. And with the king's prisoners. That's going to be important later on. And he was there in prison. Okay. It's interesting. One of my favorite movies is I don't know if you've seen the DreamWorks Joseph King of Dreams movie.
Yeah.
Seen that one? I thought that was an excellent showing of the story. But I think they got this section a little bit wrong. In that movie, they're kind of, they look at Potiphar, and Potiphar kind of knows that his wife is had did this, that she's lying, and he kind of reluctantly sends Joseph to prison. You know, he's mad, but he kind of knows that his wife is up to something. But I think that's a little bit too much interpretation. And when you look at this section here,
Well, you know what? I'm looking at it thinking, why did he put him in the king's prison? He really liked this guy. He could have put him in a mud puddle at the bottom of the
he
The
could,
prison.
yeah, I suppose he could have killed him. Yeah,
Same with-
I have a note on that here in my book. It says, though Potiphar's anger may initially be directed at Joseph, his subsequent action indicates that he doubts his wife's accusation.
oh, really?
Rape of the master's wife by a slave might have earned a death sentence, but Joseph's punishment was confinement with the king's prisoners is relatively mild.
Okay, so maybe they're right. Okay, yeah. So his first reaction is kindled, and then he throws him into prison. But there's the notes are saying this is a mild
Mhm.
punishment for him.
Country club.
Although the only thing is though that remember the later on the baker and the butler are in there with him, and the baker gets killed, if I remember. So
Mm.
arrow. So yeah, it's but either way, the Lord, whether he intends to soften it, whether he believes that Joseph did this or not, the Lord clearly is kind of protecting him through this, however this works. And now notice how the story ends. It's like it does a full circle. We're
Yeah.
come back to the beginning again now.
The
And what does
keep-
it say now? The Lord.
Makes him successful in everything he does.
It sounds like we've heard that before. The Lord, first he says,
Was with Joseph.
showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison then puts him in charge of everything.
Yep.
And he paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge. Why?
Because the Lord was with them.
The Lord was with him. Whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So if you kind of look back over the story, we can start seeing it begins with this chapter is really an interesting way it begins. It's sort of, I think you might call it in the term, a literary term that sometimes uses an inclusio. An inclusio is where the story begins and ends in the same space. You kind of come full circle. So it starts here and then things happen and then you're right back at the beginning again. That's kind of what's happening in chapter 39. It begins with Joseph as a captive, a slave now, but the Lord's with him. The Lord's with him. The Lord's with him. The Lord blesses him. The Lord gives him success. He is a prisoner of men, but blessed by God. And then there's really, the next two sections, we see this challenge, this middle section, and Joseph mentions that I cannot do this great wickedness, but there's no mention of the Lord really in this next section here. And it feels as if the Lord has abandoned him. It feels like this is a horrible thing that's happening to him. He's righteous. He's done nothing wrong. It's very clear. He is faithful and steady. And this is horrible what's happened. He is falsely accused and severe. And even though it might be a mild punishment, it's still a severe punishment for an innocent man. He's done nothing. And so he's thrown in prison. And so at that point, you can feel the tension of like, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's as if the Lord who had blessed him at the early onset, everything was going great, and then everything is lost. And it's gone now. And then he returns. And he comes back with just even perhaps a greater amount of love than before, and steadfast love, and everything he does succeeds. He puts him in charge, and that's how it works. So this is sort of a pattern. We've seen this pattern before, what happened? The Lord gives, when we saw Abraham and the Lord makes his covenant with Abraham and says, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to bless you. Everyone will be, the world will be blessed through you. I'm going to give you this land. I will be with you, and so forth. And then immediately after that, there's a famine in the land, if you remember. And what happens to Abraham with the famine at the very beginning? Do you
Goes to-
remember?
Goes to Egypt,
Goes to Egypt. And what happens in Egypt?
gets in trouble.
Pharaoh takes his wife. It's like he gives this great promise, and then immediately he takes everything away. And then he brings it all back again. And this pattern again and again. Same thing we saw it with Jacob. You know, he's the one who receives the blessing. He's the one who gets the inheritance. He's the one that the word of God is for. And then he has to spend the next 20 years of his life on the run from his brother who wants to kill him, from his father-in-law who wants to kill him, until finally he can return and everything restored. And God comes back to him. So with Jacob's story, remember, he sees the angels and meets the angels and at Bethel, and the Lord says, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back and bless you. And Jacob says, wow, this is the house of God. And if he really will bring me back, and then the Lord will be my God. And he goes off. And when he comes back, he meets the angels again. That includes you. He comes back to the same spot. So I think it's a good reminder for us. How many times have we experienced God's love in that way, where he has blessed us and helped us, and we really felt his presence, and then it's like he disappears, only to return, and with greater blessings in the end. So
Usually he
Okay.
returns when you're at the bottom of your rope hanging on.
yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
Saves it.
And always, and that's how he tests our faith. That's how he tests our faith. And the life of the Christian is that the life of Christ. It's not that Jesus came and ascended to glory, but that he came and he went to the cross and to the tomb. He went to the dead, and then he rose again. And that pattern. So it's like, as we go through our own experiences of life, this is a good story because it just reminds us, like Job, you can't look at this and say, well, what could Joseph have done differently to avoid getting thrown into prison?
Nothing.
Nothing. He did what was right. He was
Yeah.
righteous.
Well, actually, there is something he could have done. He could have slept with Potiphar's wife.
Oh, right.
Righteous. Jeez.
You know, if you're gonna say, well, he should have done this or that, it's like he could have done that. He could have,
It just
but you're
created
right. Yeah,
thickly webbed of
But only because we know the ending, that all this is happening for a reason.
yeah,
He
absolutely,
doesn't see it yet, but
absolutely. And Joseph knows it. And I think at the end, I think when you can imagine his despair being thrown into prison, but then you know that it's like the winds have shifted when he's there, and the same experience he's having of the favor he's getting with the prison guard. And yes, he's in a lower position than before, but the Lord is with him. The Lord is with him. That makes all the difference. So that is chapter 39. Any last comments or questions about Joseph's story so far? And
Well,
okay, great. Stop recording.